You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 FM, broadcasting from the EOC in North Port, Florida. This is John Rawlings, and I've got Mr. Scott Titus on the mic today. Man, we're just back to back with information today. Chief, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
And I know you were just on. Give us a quick update on, I know we just talked about Lady Slipper a few minutes ago. Your concern as EMS and even the police department getting in there to assist.
So, we have high water vehicles in place, for post-storm and even for now, but our problem is our timeline is running out to start to get to some of these locations until we get to shutdown mode. So that's our bigger concern. Our bigger concern is the period of time that we're going to have shutdown. Once the storm passes and we know that we're going to have roads that are impassable by regular passenger vehicle, we have large military high water vehicles, and we have boats on standby. We have a strike team of boats coming. We have a couple of boats at our disposal for early response, but it takes a little while to assemble those and get those out and determine where those priority levels are. So again, we talked earlier about people, if they could evacuate or not. Lady Slipper runs along that creek. That's an area that typically does flood, and although it's not an A, B, or C as far as storm surge goes and evacuation zones go, we did issue a recommendation for people to evacuate that area because it's going to be very difficult to get back in there when the water gets higher.
And that's a heavily flooded area in most cases anyway, isn't it?
Yes. As a matter of fact, when I was before we talked last time, when I was out kind of scouting the area, checking on some things, you could tell some of the people that traditionally live there because they already have their cars parked up on US 41. So a lot of those people have been through it before, and they've moved their vehicles so their vehicles weren't flooded. And some of these areas that traditionally flood, those people will take kayaks, boats, canoes, from their houses back out to the road or out to their vehicles.
So they've adapted to living in that Lady Slipper area, correct?
They have. Our concern is and that's kind of what I've been saying all along, is that this is a little bit of a different storm. So because we're so saturated, some of those people have adapted and they're used to this, and they're treating it a little bit kind of like they have in the past. Those outcomes could be a little bit different because I think we're gonna have higher water. We're still at the beginning parts of this event, and we've got a long way to go and quite a bit of rain coming until we get through it. Even once the storm passes, the flood from the floodplain to the north of us, as that water comes down through the city, that water level will continue to rise over the next several days.
So I was just watching it a little bit, and I saw they're still talking. We're going to get some, but I think it's kind of stayed on the path of going a little bit straighter than making a little wobble. We still got some time yet for it to wobble, but are you feeling a little bit better than you did a few minutes ago when you were on?
No. So and I'll just say, there are always these wobbles, and you never know, even as it comes down to the area where we're in right now. If it's 10, 15, 20 miles to the north or 10, 15, 20 miles to the south, it's not a lot of difference. We're still going to have some significant impacts. Of course, the further the storm moves away from us, we get a little bit of relief. Right now, with some of the wind shear, we're kind of in a little bit of a dry pocket. I don't know that continues. Again, I don't think the expectation for the rain amounts that we're going to get totals is going to change significantly. There's nothing I would love more than for the storm to pass and everybody to tell me that we were wrong. Those are the things that are a whole lot easier to swallow than to not be prepared. So we're still well within that cone of uncertainty. There's still time as that storm approaches us. It's still not supposed to come ashore until late tonight, early tomorrow morning. So even though people are kind of getting these bans, and when they look at the TV, there's some people that are thinking, gosh, that storm is it's right upon us, and it's not. It's still coming. So there's still a lot of room for it to move a little bit as we get closer to that timeline to making landfall. Yes, it'll solidify it a little bit, but again, these wobbles to the north south, that's somewhat routine until they took their focus and really changed it and said, when they say we're 100% certain this is where it's going, which rarely happens until right before landfall. We still just need to be vigilant.
As a department, when you have your guys out looking right now, and you said you were on the road, you were doing that same thing. I'm sure your guys are relaying all of this back to you too. Is there a team lead that takes that information before you, or how's that all put together?
So we're operating here in the Emergency Operations Center, and has different kind of pieces of the whole city from fire, police, utilities, public works, and out in the field, our crews that are responding to calls day to day, they're still out there. And although we've overstaffed and have extra vehicles, they've set up a fire department operations center too. So Deputy Chief Lane is at the fire department operations center, and he's kind of managing all those incidents there. He's getting information back from the field, and then he relays that information here to the EOC, to our fire liaison. And then, we get that information as the ops chief is what my position is, where I'll be assigned here going in a couple of minutes. That information comes in from our 4 major areas, and we kind of put that together with our planning document for what's going on now, and then what we're planning over that next 12-hour response period.
Do you feel like this storm is going to create havoc? I had one of the comments on the emergency update we have with Jason a few minutes ago. They were asking, where's it going to hit? One of the comments was, it's going to hit. Are you in that realm? It's going to hit?
Yeah, it's going to hit. I think the matter right now is just how severe is that going to be? Unfortunately, right now it's calm before the storm. So everybody you have this couple of days of anticipation, and as it gets closer and closer, and most of us generally have almost a sense of disbelief, as these things come. Generally as people, we like to think, oh, bad things aren't going to happen to us. And so we're always waiting for that last minute plausible explanation that we're going to be spared, or things aren't going to be as bad as they look like they were going to. And of course we hope that's the case. But everything is pointed to, this has been pretty consistent messaging over the last 24 hours from the National Weather Service for our area that's in that cone, what the impacts are going to be as far as storm surge, as far as rainfall, as far as wind field. So although, as I said, that may go up or down a little bit, I think there's still, going to be some difficulties. There's still going to be severe impacts here, regardless of whether that's a little bit north of us or drops a little closer to us.
Those that have been here through Ian was a different beast all by itself. Do you think we're going to feel those same impacts on flooding that we felt through Ian?
I believe that we are. Yes, I do. As I said, we really haven't gotten any updated information that says we're going to get less rain overall. And as I said, as we get closer, when you look outside right now and you go, well, it's not raining. We're kind of between bands. We are in a little bit of a dry pocket right now. The one thing that really has helped us, which the National Weather Service has predicted all along, was this wind shear as it came, across the Gulf of Mexico. Had there not been the wind shear that there was, this would have been a strong Category 5. If you think about how warm the Gulf water is and how hurricanes form, this would have come across the Gulf of Mexico and been a strong 5 hitting us. It's the wind shear that has kind of helped. It's built up and then died back down. So as it approaches landfall, that wind shear is kind of, it's battling. The storm's battling. It's trying to build, and that wind shear is helping keep it down. We're still, everything that I'm hearing is still predicting a strong Category 3. As it approaches land, that wind field is actually supposed to expand, and which has been showing that it's been doing that. This was a relatively strong, kind of concise storm as it came into us. The size of it's going to expand as it gets closer. That wind field is going to get bigger. When I was here talking to you earlier, actually, it was remarkable. We were just getting a first band here, and 2 minutes after we finished talking earlier, we're looking at storm patterns on the East Coast from those bands and tornadoes. So don't want everybody to kind of get lulled into this false insecurity, like it's okay outside now. Just look it on TV. It looks like the storm's almost right upon us. It's not going to be that bad. I think we're still in for a ride.
As far as I want to hone in on Lady Slipper, because I had a really good friend, Joe, who lived back there, and I kind of went back and got him out post event. This is a good type of conversation to have before we get to sustained winds of 45 miles an hour. For people in Lady Slipper who've been in that situation or other outlying areas that need to listen to what you're saying. The best case scenario is you're wrong. The worst case scenario is you're right. You do feel that way, right?
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. And I think that, as I said earlier, that window of time period is narrowing on when people can leave and go find a safer location. There's going to be flooding along those streets along the Myakatchee Creek, Lady Slipper area down to the west side of Sumter. Those people have received, phone messaging to say that that's going to happen. And again, a lot of them are used to that happening in the past. Our fear is all the indications are that it's going to be worse than it has been in the past. That won't be immediate. Again, that's a creeping thing. The difficulty is once it starts getting too bad you can't get out, then it makes it even worse. Once that water really starts moving, it's not just a matter of flooding, but now it's flooding and moving water, and it makes it very difficult.
So if I'm correct, or we did not have the same sustained winds for the Ian event with the flooding that we may have with the flooding and this event and the sustained winds. That there's going to be a difference between the two storms.
Absolutely. Well, with Ian, we weren't as saturated as we are now. So the flooding is going to come earlier, but it's also going to last longer because not only are we saturated, so the flooding is going to come earlier. It's going to flood in different areas. It's going to flood in the traditional areas of the city, but it's also going to flood in different areas because of the storm surge. So both of those things in combination. The flooding then is going to continue to get worse over the next several days, especially in those areas along the creek. After the storm has passed, some of the storm surge areas, some of those evacuation areas that receive a lot of water tonight and tomorrow, that water will recede. That's with the storm surge. And as the tides go out and as the storm surge leaves, it'll start letting those canals empty out. But it's been backed up, and now along the Myakatchee Creek, it's not only handling all the rain that we get here in the city, but everything to the north of us, which is going to continue to build. They used to, I don't know if the ratio is still the same because of all the work that Public Works has done, but it used to be that for every inch of rain that we got to the north of us, it was about a foot of rise in the creek. A foot of rise is significant.
It is massive.
Once we reach, once it leaves the banks, it's very hard to predict how much goes up because when it's within the banks, we have a meter that says, okay, well, it raised a foot, it raised whatever. Now when it raises a foot, once it leaves the banks, the foot isn't that same amount of water. It's not the same cubic feet of water because now it's spreading laterally. And so, now when it raises an inch when it's outside of the banks, it's a significant amount.
So the citizens that are listening right now, feel free to ask any questions that you have for Chief. He's willing to take questions. He's got a few minutes extra that he can put into this. You go on at 6 o'clock tonight, right? Officially on duty?
Yeah. We'll be back in the EOC at 6. Some of the things people can be thinking about now is obviously if they're sheltering in place after the storm goes, they're probably not going to have power. There's a lot of people out there that have generators and things like that. So, think, be safe. Understand you can't run a generator in your garage. That carbon monoxide will build up. It'll find its way into the house and you'll have issues. So make sure your generators are clear of the house. Don't let them be underneath the eaves because that can still get into the house. I read something earlier on one of the Facebook pages where somebody had their generator already hooked up and they had the cord out the door and they were just waiting to lose power. And, the difficulty with that is if your door is opened, you're allowing that pressure from the storm to come in. So our recommendation would be keep your house sealed up tight now, keep your doors and windows closed, and don't open it up till once the storm passes. If you've lost power, then go ahead and hook up to the generator. If your refrigerator stuff should stay cold for a couple of hours, overnight as the storm's passing, and most of us are normally sleeping during the night, so you don't really need access to a lot of that whole bunch. So,
great question, Robin. Do you know if the city shuts off the water at any particular time because of the flooding?
So typically there's not a plan to completely shut off the water. You'll see that in a lot of, City of Venice, Siesta Key, Longboat Key, Barrier Islands, Englewood, they do it on Minnesota. They'll shut off the water for a couple of different reasons. One, because there's a very likelihood of damage to that infrastructure and that water wouldn't do any good either.
Yep.
But also when they shut off those evacuation zones, they kind of don't want people out there. So that's kind of an extra, incentive to go. But it's really about preserving the water in the system. Here in the past, we've not preemptively shut water off because we don't have usually that type of exposure. As you know, the last big hurricane that we had when the some of the roadway and price was washed out. We lost some infrastructure and some water lines, which is not normal for us during these types of events. The water was not shut off, and we had to go out and find out. Utilities had to go out and find out where that leak was. We lost quite a bit of water, so it produced water pressure everywhere in the system. I do know that they did reduce the pressure a little bit. Typically, the system runs around low 70s pressure, 70 psi. I think they dropped that a little bit just to kind of lessen the strain, so that it's doesn't have maybe issues or isn't as prone to having issues as we go through the storm. But right now, there isn't a plan to shut anything off.
Fantastic. Michael Rawlings, my son, helped me create this content that's out here. He asks, and it's a great question because it leads into a lot of the things you're worried about. What time is high tide?
I'd have to look it up. So I got a briefing a little while ago, and I apologize. I don't believe it won't, but I'm happy to look it up, and I can get.
Well, you keep talking, and I'll look it up.
Okay. Yeah.
But talk about the difference in high tide and low tide and what that means to us, and I'll look up the time.
Yeah, it's a great question. So again, back to earlier, where some people don't really think that storm surge affects our community. It does, and one of the reasons and where you can see it is just at normal tide time. So any of our areas like along Marina Park, some of those creeks and canals that are susceptible to a tidal change, and you can see those changes when the storm surge is coming in. If the tide is low, it's going to come in, and then tide comes up, it's going to make it twice as bad. The other difficulty is when the tide is high, storm surge is coming in, that has difficulty letting water out of the system. So anytime Public Works talks about moving water through the system, when it's high tide or an incoming tide, it's hard to let water out of the system because it's kind of pushing against itself. So I think we got that information. 5 p.m.
Yeah, it's 5 right now. But we've kind of got this little trap going on because we're high tide now, but then we're low tide, and then we're high tide again, and most of what we're fearing water-wise is actually tomorrow.
Yes. Well, one of the things you'll see is, so even though we're high tide now, so 5 p.m. high tide comes in, when the tide starts going out, that's about the time that storm surge is going to be affecting us. So tide's not necessarily going to go out as it normally would, because it's the storm pushing all these winds. It's going to push it back up. So it's actually going to hold that tide, and it's going to be pushing water in. As high tide, as that low tide then switches to high tide again, it's just going to allow that push to be even that much easier.
We talked about this prior to the location of landfall, and if it's south of Tampa Bay, it pulls that water out of Tampa Bay, doesn't it?
It can, when it's south, because of the way the rotation is. So absolutely. The storm surge is part of the problem. The other thing, I don't know if anybody's ever heard, our Public Works Director, Chuck, speak. They do a really good job. And I've still been reading a lot of stuff today about some people upset about just that one rain band that went through and how we had flooding in the streets. And he gave a really great analogy about a bathtub. And he said, if you have run your shower, your bathtub, it drains, it stays normal. You go step in there, you got a little bit of water on the bottom of your feet, and everything's good. You take a 5-gallon bucket, you dump it in there all at once. It takes it a while to drain, so you're standing in ankle deep water. That's kind of exactly what happens when these storm bands come through. We're saturated. It's going to take a while for that to run off, and as we keep adding more to it, and now with the tide and with the pressure of that tidal surge, especially in those tidal areas that are susceptible, it's not allowing that to go out. So now you dump that 5-gallon bucket in, and it's kind of like plugging the drain or slowing it down. So.
Anything else that you feel the citizens should know at this point?
I think it's continued safety messages of staying off the roads if you don't need to be on the roads. Don't go out and driving it. Please don't go playing it. I know we have some people. I was young once too, so I get it. That something like this happens and there's water out in the ditches and things like that. They want to go out and play. It can be really dangerous. There can be some, a lot of debris. There can be currents. There can be things that's not seen there. So be really careful with that. I don't know if anybody's been paying attention to it. So, but the last storm that went through, there was a significant number, and there's actually a study that started very quickly about how many fires have been caused by lithium batteries. So if you have a golf cart with a lithium battery, if you have tools, things like that, if they're in your garage and they're susceptible to getting wet on that garage floor, if you think you're going to get some water, get those things up off the floor, get them out of the area where they're going to get wet, because they have a propensity to cause a fire. Those lithium batteries are reactive to air and water, and if that container that they're in breaches at all, you can have a major issue.
So one of the other things that I want to highlight real quick, because we do have a lot of people down now that have never been through this. It's their first time. Talk about the eye wall and being in the eye of the storm, and why you shouldn't wander outside because it's calm, because you might get caught.
Yeah, so if the storm passes directly over us, and I've been in a couple of those scenarios before, it is a little bit eerie and uncanny, and it's almost, if you can imagine, severe wind, severe rain, and then you look outside, it's kind of got a calm, just like it is right now, and it tends to, everybody kind of wants to go, oh look, it's done. The worst of it is past, and it's really just that eye that's passing over. So we would encourage you, don't go outside, don't open your house up, don't have issues, don't get back on the road for goodness sake, and think that something has passed. So, listen to WKDW, listen to John, keep giving you updates, keep checking our Facebook page, keep checking Sarasota County's page, news on the television, everything, all the sources you can to let you know when that has passed. But right now we know that storm is going to go through the night, and we're going to have effects of that into daylight time. So if you think that you're going to leave anytime during tonight, I would highly recommend that you don't do that. It's going to be difficult to see the roads. It's going to be dangerous, and we're not going to be able to get out.
Now or never. Because really, if you don't do it once it gets dark, hunker down. Let's see. One other thing Robin said is the City of North Port call center still active at this time. Boom.
Yes, the City of North Port call center is still active at this time. They're answering questions. I believe they're going to be staying there until at least 8 p.m. and then they may, the crew may reduce, but I think there'll be somebody there overnight. Again, once the storm comes, there's not really a lot of things to do. The call center doesn't have a lot more information to give. At that point, it's really kind of locked down. There's a fairly good chance that we will lose, satellite phone communications, regular telephone communications for a period of time, internet, activity. As those things come back online, people will regain that connectivity. But
that's the time we're going to have to nap a little bit.
Absolutely.
Quick follow-up though about EMS, 45-mile-an-hour winds. Tell about that and what happens if you do have an emergency. Should people pick up the phone and call anyway?
Yeah, so even if we shut down emergency operations, and if you have an emergency at your house, yes, absolutely. Pick up the phone, call 911. What they'll do is they'll take your information and they'll put you on a list. They'll prioritize your emergency versus the other emergency calls that are coming in. And when it's safe for us to get back out on the road, once those tactical first-in teams have gone out and cleared the roadways and given their assessments, and we get our emergency vehicles back on the road, you'll be in the queue somewhere for us to come back out. So it's not that you can't call 911. We just won't be able to get to you for a while.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time as always. Citizens of North Port, please follow me. I'm doing everything I can to push information out through the EOC. Thank you for listening in. I'm going to take a little break, get some food, and recharge. I would suggest you guys do the same thing. It's going to be a long night. Chief, thank you so much.
Thanks, John.